With all of our modern technology, have you ever stopped to think if there's a line we just shouldn't cross? Today, we're jumping into a really influential document from 1968 called Humana Vitae. It makes a powerful case for an unbreakable bond right at the heart of marriage, and honestly, its predictions have been stirring up debate for more than 50 years now. So let's get into its core principles. So, what's at the heart of all this? Well, the document poses this huge question for our time, right? Just because we can control something, even the creation of life itself, does that mean we should? It really makes you think, are there natural limits to what we do? And, where do we draw that line?
All right, so to really get a handle on this, we're going to break it down into 4 parts. First up, what prompted this new question in the first place? Then we'll get into the core idea, the 2 meanings of marriage. After that, we'll see how that plays out with parenthood and natural law. And we'll wrap up by looking at the pretty startling future consequences that were predicted.
Okay, so first things first, why was this even written? Well, you have to picture the mid-20th century. The world was changing, and fast, and all these changes kind of forced a fresh look at some really long-standing moral teachings.
Look at this. It really was a perfect storm back in the 60s. You've got this widespread anxiety about a so-called population boom. At the exact same time, there's this incredibly important new understanding of the dignity of women. And then underpinning all of it is this massive leap in technology, man's growing control over nature, and that includes our own bodies. So when all these forces collide, you get a totally new moral landscape. And it raised questions that, frankly, nobody had ever really had to ask before.
Okay, this brings us to the absolute core of the whole argument. Everything else we're going to talk about is built right on top of this one foundational idea, that the marital act has 2 meanings, and, this is key, they're inseparable.
So the first meaning is what's called the unitive significance, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It's about uniting the husband and wife, in that deep, personal, intimate bond. It's really about that total gift of self to each other that makes the relationship stronger.
And then there's the second part, the procreative significance. This one's pretty straightforward, right? It's just acknowledging that the act is, by its very nature, designed with the capacity to create new life. It's inherently open to having children. And right here, this is the linchpin, the absolute non-negotiable of this teaching. It says that these 2 meanings we just talked about, the unitive and the procreative, they're linked. It's an unbreakable bond. So the argument is that each and every marital act has to keep that connection to procreation. It has to stay open to life. So you might be asking, okay, but why? And this is where it gets to the heart of it. This isn't presented as some man-made rule you can just decide to ignore. The idea here is that this connection is fundamental, that it was established by God himself, woven right into what marriage is. It's a bond that humans, on their own, just don't have the right to break.
All right, so that's the big principle. But how does it actually play out in real life? Well, this is where the ideas of responsible parenthood and natural law come in.
Now, when the document talks about responsible parenthood, it means something a lot bigger than just deciding how many kids to have. It's about seeing your duties to God, to yourself, to your family, and even to society. It also means having a real awareness of and respect for your body's own biological functions, and it calls for reason and will to control our natural drives. Ultimately, it's about operating within what's described as an objective moral order, one that's established by God. And that's a perfect lead-in to this idea of natural law. Let me put it this way. A farmer doesn't invent the seasons, right? They discover them, they learn them, and they work with them to grow things. Well, the argument here is that moral law is kind of the same. It's not something we make up. It's something that's already built into the order of reality, and our job is to use our intelligence to understand it and live by it.
Okay, so this is where the rubber meets the road. The document draws a really sharp line. On one side, you have what's called periodic continence. This is seen as lawful because you're essentially working with the natural cycles of the body. You're respecting that order we just talked about. But on the other side, you have artificial birth control. And that's considered unlawful because it's an intentional act to obstruct the natural process. It's seen as directly breaking that inseparable connection between uniting and procreating.
So what's the big deal? What did the author think would happen if people just ignored this teaching? Well, the document didn't hold back. It laid out 3 pretty specific and, frankly, alarming predictions about what would happen to society.
Prediction number 1, a general lowering of morality. The thinking went like this. If you break that fundamental link between the marital act and creating life, you open up a wide and easy road to things like infidelity.
The logic is that if you remove that deeper meaning, the sacred bond of marriage itself could be weakened. The second warning was all about respect for women. The fear was that a man might start to, well, forget the reverence he owes his wife, that he could start to see her as just an instrument for his own desires, instead of a partner to be cherished. It's a stark warning about objectification and losing sight of her total well-being, both physical and emotional.
And the third prediction, honestly, it's pretty chilling. It's about government overreach. The question was posed, who's going to stop rulers from pushing or even imposing the method of contraception they think is best for their population goals? You can see how this would be a huge intrusion into the most personal, most intimate responsibility of a husband and wife.
And so that really brings us to today. Here we are, over 50 years later. And the big question is, how do these predictions hold up? It's a really challenging thought, isn't it? It forces us to think about the connection between our most private choices and the kind of world we're all living in.